According to the powers bestowed onto me, the next US president will be... No, of course I don't have the power to predict who will be the next US president. But what I do have is an analysis of what might happen if either party won, so that you can prepare and react accordingly. The US presidential elections is contested between Donald Trump from the Republican Party and Kamala Harris from the Democratic Party. I'll make it simpler by using the colors used by the parties to explain their respective policies and parties. Disclaimer, I'm just going to talk about economic policies, so social issues, foreign policies, and whatsoever will not be covered here. First up, taxes. In a broad categorization, Trump wants to reduce taxes and Kamala Harris wants to increase taxes. Trump is advocating tax cuts for companies and the rich. In his first term, he reduced corporate tax from 35% to 21% and has promised to reduce it even more if he does get re-elected. The direct result of that will be having more businesses in the United States and encouraging employment. Kamala Harris has also promised tax cuts for small and medium enterprises or SMEs, but for big companies, she wants to increase the corporate tax from 21% to 28%. For the rich, their taxes will be increased as well. This means that while you are encouraging more businesses to be set up in the United States, the bigger companies might be thinking of relocating their resources elsewhere. Because if I'm a multinational company and I want to set up a new office, getting taxed less is definitely a big draw to me. Next topic, national debt. The US dollar is the most commonly used currency when it comes to trading between countries, accounting for an average volume of $2.9 trillion daily. So it would be safe to assume that the world's economy largely depends on how healthy the US dollar is. And how healthy the US dollar is depends on the interest rate it fetches. So then, what does the interest rate depend on? For the short term, it depends on the Federal Reserve, but for the long term, it largely depends on the national debt. If government debt increases, supply of US dollar will increase as well, prices will decrease, and interest rate will increase. Using this logic, we can roughly guess both candidates' approach when it comes to national debt. Because they're not going to go around campaigning and saying, "We want more debt," or "We want to borrow more money." So we have to derive the conclusion from what they are proposing. Let's take a look at Donald Trump. If he wants to reduce more tax, the money has to come from somewhere, so it's safe to assume that he will borrow more money. For Kamala Harris, she probably has to borrow as well, but it will be more of a conservative approach. The US national debt is at $35 trillion now, out of which $28 trillion is external, which makes up 99% of its GDP. An estimation by Bloomberg suggests that if Trump wins, that number will be 118% at the end of his 4-year term, and for Harris, that number will be 109%. So yes, both parties have to borrow, it's just a matter of who is more aggressive. Next up, attracting foreign investment. With the promise of reduced taxes, Trump and the Republicans will attract more MNCs to come to the US and for local companies to stay there. In the short term, it will definitely be a boost to the US economy because from his last term, we could see his policies have been pro-business and pro-market. For Kamala Harris and the Democrats, their aim is to reduce the gap from the poor and the rich, so it is not so attractive for businesses. So now that we have covered how Trump and Harris differ on getting money, it's time to talk about how they will spend money. Trump and the Republicans will likely focus more on national defense, whereas Harris and the Democrats will likely focus on social welfare. Things like subsidies for lower income groups, single parents, etc. Obamacare was a great example of how the Democrats worked. Next up, trade. Now, both parties are similar in the sense that they want increased globalization, increased trade, and more jobs for Americans. The main difference is how they are going to do it. Trump has been very aggressive about implementing trade tariffs to China and goods from China. He aims to set tariffs at 10 to 20% for products from other countries and up to 60% if they are from China. Harris has been less aggressive about tariffs except for China. So to places like Japan, Europe, and South America, the results of the elections could play a part in their economies. Because if Trump wins, that means American consumers will have to pay more for foreign products, so that will decrease the demand. In fact, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde has publicly stated that Trump would be a threat to Europe if he does get re-elected. Now, of course, during campaigns, you have to take their promises with a pinch of salt. The more important thing is looking at how both parties approach different issues and how their attitude is towards them. For example, if Trump says he wants 10 to 20% tariffs on all products from overseas, that number might be lower than expected. It will depend on the negotiations between countries. But at least we know that is the direction that he and his party are looking at. Increasing tariffs will increase the income of the government, and that is one avenue the Republicans are looking at to get money. However, one result of increased tariffs is increased inflation. Goods imported from overseas will not just be more expensive for consumers, but also for companies. While the intention is for Americans to buy more American products, the side effect of it is everything else will increase as well. And to add on to that, Trump's stance on immigration will mean that there will be less immigrants in the United States. This will further increase inflation because having more immigrants, especially newer ones, will keep prices low. Places with more immigrants have to cater to the spending power of the local population. Thus, if you want to sell to more people in your area, you have to keep prices low. So we can observe that it's usually not one single policy that affects the whole economy. It's usually a combination of a few. Previously, we talked about how Trump's direction to reduce corporate taxes will help drive the economy up. But with the increase in tariffs, we expect inflation to rise, thus driving interest rates up and the market down. Yes, it's contradictory, so sometimes it's not as easy as it seems. We have to see which policies the elected party will focus more on or which order they implement them. And from the policies that Trump and Harris are proposing, we also can understand the philosophies of the parties that they belong in. Trump and the Republicans have a more relaxed and free approach on governance, preferring a free market where Americans can trade more and grow together. Harris and the Democrats have a more controlled approach, saying they have to tax the rich more so that they can give back to the poor and everyone can enjoy the riches of the country more. And throughout US history, you can observe how the Americans are feeling about their country by how they vote. Yes, there are people who vote by party lines, but the reason why these two parties have been switching amongst each other is because these people are not enough to swing the control of the country one way or the other. So it very much depends on how the voters want America to be like for the next 4 years. To sum it up, and I have to emphasize that this is just theoretical, if Trump wins, inflation will be higher, national debt will be higher, capital markets will go up, trade will be more Americanized, the rich-poor gap will be wider, more capital influx, and a better US economy. So who do you think will win the US election? And what are you looking forward to the most when it comes to the new president's policies? To be honest, I'm completely neutral and I try to be as much as possible in this video. If at any point of time you thought that I was biased towards any of the parties, I wasn't, right? So don't think too much. The more important thing is whichever side wins, we know how to handle and react accordingly. So I hope this video has helped you with that.